Hey everybody. Um, I'm gonna wait until about the 1.5 to 3 minute mark, somewhere in that range, until I start going into the nuts and bolts of today's podcast. But the topic today is whether or not the Trump administration will be able to get Brett Kavanaugh confirmed to the Supreme Court. And this is an issue that I don't have a definitive opinion one way or another. Um, Hi, Mark. How goes it? But what I do think is we're experiencing something that's unprecedented. Okay, we're taking it for granted because we're living in the moment. That right now, with the Kavanaugh hearings and the magnitude of the allegations, not the truthfulness, not the veracity, but the pure sheer magnitude of the allegations that have been advanced against Brett Kavanaugh, and the fact that he still remains a Supreme Court nominee says a lot about the times that we're living in. I mean, 20 some years ago, I believe 27 ago, and then 28 years ago, Bush won, or Bush 41 nominated Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. And allegations surfaced with Anita Hill, a former law clerk, and somebody that he worked at the EEOC with, that he engaged in sexual misconduct with her. But those allegations didn't even touch the surface of what's being alleged here with Kavanaugh. Do I believe it? I believe it's like the old saying goes: there's three sides of a story: his side, her side, and the truth. Okay, and right now, as we speak, um, the nomination is on turbulent ground in a way because of the composition of the state Senate, and in a way, or of the U.S. Senate, I'm sorry, the composition of the U.S. Senate, in a way because of the midterm elections. Um, Good morning, Glenn. How are you? But I will say this: today's 2018 Supreme Court confirmations are so partisan charged and fueled on a partisan basis that essentially um, you already start with just about losing half of the aisle. Okay, so in a Senate that's 50-50, Kavanaugh lost at least 40 votes right off, or 35 to 40 votes right off the bat. So right now he starts out 65-35, say. Okay, and then you have the Republican senator from Alaska and the Republican senator from Maine, who are moderate Republicans. They're shopping cart Republicans. I mean, they won their elections by narrow margins, both primary and general in some cases, not all. But they have to be careful, okay? Because the Kavanaugh nomination is going to be a matter of political survival for them. All right. And right or wrong, at this point in time, if they vote to confirm this guy, at least Morosky or Collins is going to lose their seat. And they know it. They know it. So does that mean that they should vote to confirm him? I'm not going to get into the morality or the ethical basis, because everybody has their own sense of morality and their own sense of ethics. All that I'm going to say is Washington is a place of political survival. All right. And if they vote to confirm them, they're going to lose their seats. So that's two Republican votes that he's going to lose. So now you're up to about 67 to, or no, I'm sorry, 62 to about 38, something like that. So it's getting close. It's getting very close. Very, very close. What I do think at this point in time, the smart strategy to do would be this. All right. Not to by having the Senate hold this trial-like procedure, which is unprecedented. Trials don't occur in the Senate unless somebody's being impeached, okay? And even then, the Senate writes their own rules, folks. The Senate isn't obliged to follow the federal rules of court or the federal rules of evidence. The Senate can do whatever the heck they please. It's their political prerogative. And my concern is that this is going to turn into a circus, okay? Because what's going to happen is they're going to put each girl up there. They're going to try and undermine their testimony as much as they can, and the stuff that they can't undermine their testimony on, what they're going to do is they are going to ignore or undermine it, not in substance, but undermine it in the gravity of it. All right. And that's the problem. That's a problem. I mean, nobody's going to walk away a winner from this so-called trial in the U.S. Senate for the Kavanaugh confirmation. The only thing that's going to happen is it's going to potentially diminish the reputation for the Supreme Court, and it's going to diminish the prestige and the integrity of the U.S. Senate, because the U.S. Senate is a place where we send our very best politicians, our most experienced lawmakers and legislators in every state. And now this mockery of a trial or a hearing, whatever you want to call it, which is going to probably entail direct examination, cross-examination of witnesses. It's going to be insane, all right? The two accusers, they're going to bring up everything about their personal lives to try and prove some kind of a bias. I mean, as far as their stories go, what I anticipate personally is going to occur is they are going to leave the stories as vague as possible. And the reason for that, it's simple, okay? When you make an accusation or when you get confronted with an accusation, the vaguer that it is, the more palatable it is. The less susceptible it is to being impeached or attacked. The more details that you add, the more risk that you run of being called out on those details or having there be a slip up on those details. And that's exactly why you're going to have vague accusations that somebody was at a party 30 some years ago and blah, blah, blah. And somebody was in a dorm room or somebody was at somebody's house, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to play into the empathy card, you know? I mean, I expect that you're going to have women out there protesting against the Kavanaugh nomination 10 times more of what it's been. It's just a rallying cry for both sides, and it's not good, you know? But I do think that the best thing that could happen is we could get as close to the truth as we possibly can, and they can form a judgment on the basis from there. I mean, I would hope that if they're going to drag this guy's name through the mud and they're going to make this guy look like a pervert and everything else and tarnish his reputation for the bare point or the basic point that they don't want an arch conservative and an originalist to dictate the court's agenda or the court swing vote for the next 3 generations, that's worth to the liberal machine dragging this guy through the dirt. Well, it's sad. It's very, very, very sad. I mean, look at the Gorsuch nomination, okay? When Gorsuch was confirmed to the court, we got what we bought, all right? We saw what we were buying, okay? People knew what Gorsuch stood for. People knew what Gorsuch's ideology was. I mean, he was enshrouded in a pool of decisions. And Justice Gorsuch has turned out to stand by each and every one of the decisions that we thought he would. And I think that if Gorsuch's nomination had come at a time where he was replacing Kennedy and not Scalia, you would be seeing the same kind of nitpicking and the same kind of penny ante type of stuff and these smear tactics that have run amok with the Kavanaugh nomination and the Gorsuch nomination. It's nothing against Kavanaugh. It's the fact that the liberal machine and the liberal media in this country had to do something to prevent the court swing vote from going to somebody of Kavanaugh's ideology. And I understand why they did what they did, but does that still justify it? No. NJ Diver. Since when did the people decide on choosing a justice? They don't decide on choosing a justice directly, NJ Diver. The judiciary is a non-representative branch of the federal government and the state government in most cases. But with that said, when senators that are up for election in such a turbulent time vote to confirm or not to confirm the swing vote on the Supreme Court, and in the backdrop you have these accusations, it makes for very interesting types of political pressure. Okay? If right now Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, votes to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, I'll tell you what, she is not going to be reelected. Okay? That's going to be the hair that breaks the camel's back. You know? I'm not saying it's right, but it is what it is. You know? Glenn B., I wanted to touch upon that too, so I appreciate you bringing it up. I think right now, if any of these accusers try and bail out at this point, I think that they'll be subpoenaed, and if they don't show up, it's contempt of Congress. The same thing like contempt of court, there's a parallel charge called contempt of Congress. Because right now, enough's enough. There has to be a hearing, and depending on what evidence is adduced at a hearing, he's going to get confirmed or he's going to get rejected by the Senate. But it's going to be close. Before I said something like 62-38. I'm doing the math in my head, folks. I'm sorry. Bear with me. I mean, I have a legal background, not a mathematical one by any means. But just counting the votes right now in the U.S. Senate down party lines. Let's see. The U.S. Senate. What's the exact breakdown in numbers in the U.S. Senate right now? Down party lines. Okay, this is cool. 51 Republican, 47 Democrat, and 2 independents that caucus as Democrats. So they're counted as Democrats. So in essence, it's 51-49. How do those 49 senators that are Democrats? Kavanaugh loses 42 off the bat. So that's really puts him down for let's see. Is he going to lose every Republican? Well, right off the bat, normally it goes down party lines. So right off the bat, he would start out at around 57-43. All right. Now with these accusations, his numbers go down to about 55-45. Where they're going to come up with the 5 extra votes and then have Pence come in as a tiebreaker vote, which I believe that almost happened if it didn't with Clarence Thomas, his nomination. But it's beyond me. I mean, I do know that the filibuster rules in the Senate have changed over the last couple of years. But a lot of people ask the question, including Bill O'Reilly and all these talking heads in the media. Why did these girls wait to show up after all these years to testify? And I think that people place an artificial amount of value on the fact that they've waited all these years to show up. The president places an artificial amount of value. The talk shows do, both liberal and conservative. And I think that question is more easily answered than what people want to believe. The reason why these girls waited so long to testify is they weighed the risks versus rewards in their mind. Okay, when you commit yourself to a position like this, where you're going to testify against a United States Supreme Court nominee, there's no turning back. Okay, I feel sorry for these ladies because neither one of these ladies are going to have the same private life that they did before. Okay, their careers likely are gonna hit a ton of road bumps, if not a brick wall, and it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for anybody. And this, girls, the only time that Brett Kavanaugh has been in a position where he had to be confirmed is when he was appointed to the D.C. Circuit. I mean, people act like he was appointed to all these prestigious positions. No, he was a water boy in the Bush administration. Okay, and toward the end of it, they said, "Hey, listen, Brett's been a good boy. We have to give him something." Okay, just like a local government and state government works in New Jersey, they had to give him something. What do you want, Brett? Oh, you want to sit in the D.C. Circuit? Okay, there's a vacancy. You went to Yale? Okay, we're not gonna have a problem getting you confirmed. He's confirmed. Okay, spends 10 years there. Okay, we have another Republican administration, the first one since Bush 2, and they wanted we'll point you to the court, Brett, because you're the best of the worst options. You know, anybody else that they could have appointed was either too young or too old. I mean, or would have fell to shit during a Senate confirmation hearing. Where right now, Brett Kavanaugh was really the best of the worst choices. Glenn B., in terms of Feinstein holding the letter back, I think that was a political move, but I also think that it was very, very smart. And why is that? She did so because I think that she personally wanted to get some kind of verification on that letter before she raised it and before she not just tarnished this guy's career, but before she outed things in committee or into the U.S. Senate. Do I think it was a violation of the rules? I mean, a lot of people are saying it's a violation of the Senate's rules. I don't buy it. And I don't buy it because there's lots of cases where senators want to verify or want to substantiate a certain piece of information before they go forward with it. Okay? Now, here's a $64,000 question, folks. Let's assume for a second that Donald Trump and his administration knew. Not that they knew everything, but they had a clue that some sort of controversy was going to surround the Kavanaugh nomination. All right. Did they intend for this to happen? Was Kavanaugh a decoy nominee? I mean, people would look at me like I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not. But look what happened in the early 2000s. Okay. Bush, too, nominated Harriet Miers, his chief White House counsel, to the Supreme Court when he knew that she wasn't a viable nominee, okay? She didn't have an appellate background per se. I don't believe she had an Ivy League law degree. I don't believe she ever clerked on the Supreme Court or in a major prestigious federal appellate clerkship. But they did that to soften the way for Samuel Alito, okay? Because if Bush, and this is smart political thinking, if Bush would have nominated Alito without first nominating Harriet Miers, the ground would have been too cemented. You wouldn't have been able to dig into it, you know? When Bush nominated Harriet Miers to smooth the path for Alito, it was clever. It's political brilliance, okay? You show somebody how much worse your nominee can be, and then you go with the original nominee you were going to go with all along, you know? And I think that that's almost precisely what Trump is doing. Now, who do I think he's going to go with if Kavanaugh doesn't get confirmed, or if one way or another the nomination gets withdrawn? I have my ideas about that. I think he's probably going to go with his sister's boy, Hardiman. And the problem that I have with Tom Hardiman is this, okay? I think he's a really smart guy, Tom Hardiman on the Third Circuit. But exactly, NJ Diver, bait and switch. You said it. Backpedaling. Exactly. You know? And the problem with Tom Hardiman is Tom Hardiman didn't have the Ivy League pedigree. He doesn't have a Supreme Court clerkship under his belt. He was never an assistant solicitor general. He was basically a guy who worked his way up. All right. He was a federal district court judge, which currently out of the 8 justices, only one ever served as a federal trial judge, and that's Sotomayor. But in a lot of Tom Hardiman's federal appellate decisions, there's a lot of saddling the fence. Okay, there's a lot of equivocation. And I don't know. I don't know if he's at the right point in his career to be that swing vote on the Supreme Court. You know, I don't think that he's capable, at least, or not. It's not that he's not capable. He's not fully developed to the point that he can commit a significant amount of his intellectual capacity to the issues that are going to come up in the Supreme Court in the next 2 to 3 terms. Okay, I mean, can Kavanaugh do a hell of a lot better on paper? It looks that way. I mean, I watched this interview, and I'll tell you what, I didn't think that his answers were as carefully crafted as I would expect from a Yale law grad and a Supreme Court nominee. I thought his answers were rather sloppy, if I must tell you the truth, especially considering that he had to know that whatever answers that he gave on that 60 minutes interview would come back to bite him in the butt during the confirmation hearing. And I think the stupidest thing that the Trump administration could have done was let him go on network broadcast television and give that interview, an uncontrolled interview. That was silly. I mean, if he would have gotten really, thank God, it remained civil for the most part. But what would have happened on that 60 minutes interview if Kavanaugh would have been painted in the corner totally, and he would have said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable answering this question. I'm walking off the show." Do you know how bad the optics on that would have been? It really was just a foolish move. Governors can give interviews, senators can give interviews, presidential candidates can give interviews. But when you have a Supreme Court nominee going on 60 Minutes saying, "I did not rape that woman," it's a problem. Because what's going to happen is this. Any kind of inconsistency between what he said on 60 Minutes and the testimony that he gives before the Senate here into the future, any kind of discrepancy will be viewed as lying, even if it's an honest mistake. And that's why I think that was just not a good idea. Really bad idea, actually. If Trump doesn't go with Hardiman, I think that his selections will be out of the box. I think he'll try doing what Nixon tried doing in the late 60s and 70s, and nominating all of these people that he felt personally would be wonderful Supreme Court justices. But the Senate didn't agree. The American people's representatives thought that they weren't qualified. When it comes to SCOTUS, any publicity is bad publicity. I don't agree with that, NJ Diver. I mean, I don't believe that judges should be giving interviews where they have to defend their own character. That I don't believe in. And I'm with you on that. Because what that does is that denigrates the integrity and the institutional reputation and the fortitude of the Supreme Court. You know? But in terms of justices getting publicity because they're encouraging literacy for children, like I knew Stephen Breyer used to go into schools and read for kids. I know that Sotomayor has been a big activist with overcriminalization of minorities and petty laws in the United States. I mean, that second category is getting a little too close to the line because what's happening there is when she's becoming an advocate for causes, what happens when those causes become implicated in the judgments that you're rendering? Okay, it totally impedes your appearance of being independent and unbiased completely. I mean, that's a $64,000 question, folks. Should Trump choose to dump Kavanaugh, or should it become apparent that Kavanaugh won't get through? Who's going to be the nominee? I mean, the court can't function with 8 members, all right? Because what happens is this, all right? And I know Breyer and I know a lot of the others like to downplay the statistics with how many times the court's 5-4. But let me tell you something, okay? The court gets to hear roughly what, in between 60 and 100 cases a year, out of 15 to 20,000 filings. All right. The cases that they choose for a reason, because they're going to have an impact on the way that the Bill of Rights and other constitutional provisions are interpreted for the foreseeable future. All right. And with that said, when you have such an ideologically opposed court made up of purposivists and textualists, you're bound to deadlock on the tough cases. Well, if you don't confirm anybody for the next year and a half or 9 months, whatever it may be, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? I'll tell you what, the last time I think this happened, or the last time that we had a really, really long wait for a Supreme Court nominee, far longer than the Merrick Garland nonsense, was, I believe, in the late 60s, early 70s, when Nixon nominated Abe Fortas's successor to the court, Harry Blackmun. I believe it took a year and a half for them to get Blackmun confirmed. Maybe a little longer. And you know, the politicians love it. The politicians love when it takes that long, because what it does is it gives political leverage, okay? It gives the ability to cut deals. And a lot of what you're seeing from Trump at the UN is a politician cutting a deal, okay? And that's what politicians do. Well, folks, we're going on almost 30 minutes. I think at 30 in another 2 to 3 minutes, I'm going to probably bounce unless the viewership picks up a little bit. I'd like to stay until 40, but it's just like, you know, I mean, I love you guys, all you guys, but 4 to 6 people are watching. You know, it's like, and I get it. It's the middle of the workday and this and that, but you know, guys, I'm going to conclude this production with this prediction. I don't think at this point in time that Brett Kavanaugh will get confirmed. I don't. But with that being said, the mere fact that right now the Senate is going through the trouble of having a formal trial-like hearing with the accusers testifying tells me that a lot of senators know stuff that isn't being made public about the nuts and bolts of the case. When Trump got on TV yesterday and he said that the second accuser admitted to being drunk while they had sex, okay, obviously the president's been briefed and he knows stuff that he's not divulging in an area that, you know, I don't think it's appropriate in this case for the government to be withholding information from the American people. All right, because it's not like there's any security implications or this and that. The reason why they're withholding information is solely because they don't want there to be political headaches in swing states and swing congressional districts. Okay. NJ Diver, you're asking about citizen journalist and what charge did she plead to? She pled to an amended obstruction charge yesterday in Wall Township Court. Are you really surprised, NJ Diver? I'm not. You know, that lady's not going to be happy until they revoke her PTI and she's in state prison. And then everybody's going to see how little attention and then throw cans of voice base to her. And the other one, well, keep it real. Deuces.